I was told once that the moon was like Israel. And I listened to this teaching, and it was really beautiful. And I agreed with it. And then thinking about an eclipse, and this really spoke to me when I saw this analogy. I guess analogy is the right word, of the moon representing Israel and the sun obviously representing the Lord. I mean, not that we worship the sun, that's not what I'm getting at, but this kind of example. And the earth representing the nations, the people of the world, the Gentiles, I guess. And it's been a little while since I listened to that teaching, and I had definitely something to say about it. It was to add to what was being talked about. And tomorrow night there is an eclipse, and so it was kind of on my mind a little bit. Also, some of the readings that I did this week, but something very specific, and that's the darkness. And I want to talk about that because sometimes the world seems so dark, and we don't always understand why. So I had thought about writing something about this, or even doing this recording, and I was going to go in a different direction. But this morning, I just opened my Bible, and sometimes I just do that, just because I don't really care what I'm reading. I just want to read some scripture. And I happened to open to Deuteronomy 31. And it just got me thinking, because we're going to get back to that, but it has to do with this. So it says in Deuteronomy 31, verse 6, "Be strong and courageous. Do not fear nor be afraid of them. For it is the Lord your Elohim," your Elohim means God. "For it is the Lord your God who is going with you. He does not fail you nor forsake you." Now, I know that you think, what does that have to do with an eclipse? But it actually really spoke to me about that. And it got me thinking, so Mark 15:34, and this is as Yeshua is crucifixion. He's in the process of the crucifixion. "And at the 9th hour, Yeshua cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," which is translated, my El, why have you forsaken me?" But in Deuteronomy it says, "I will not forsake you." And then Jesus says this. So when there's something that stands out because I don't understand it, that's what I pay attention to, because that's really where we're going to see the depth of what God's doing, because the exception proves the rule. It gives you an insight into why. Right? So I thought about this. I was like, that's weird. Just made me think about it. I was reading it earlier today. But then I read a little earlier in the chapter, just to get context, because I was still trying to mull it over. And in 33 of Mark 15, it says, "And when the 6th hour came, darkness came over all the land until the 9th hour." Now, I always assumed that was a solar eclipse that was happening. And it doesn't say that. But it was this darkness that really spoke to me. that Yeshua felt forsaken. Why? He tells us to pick up our cross and follow him. We're to be like him. And he felt forsaken. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about eclipses now. And this idea that Israel is like the moon. So, you see the sun, right? And here's the earth. And the moon is spinning around the earth, right? And we're called to be the light of the world, right? Not our light, but his light. The moon has no light of its own. And Israel is to be a blessing to the nations. What does all this mean? I mean, I get it on face value, of course. We're supposed to be a light to the world. So here's the question. What good is the moon in the day? Why would we need a moon during the day? We are called to go into the darkness, right? At least this is how I interpret this. Maybe I'm wrong. So the sun's here and the moon is circling around the earth. It's in this world, but it's not of this world. Like we are meant to be in the world, but not of the world. Because we're all Israel. We're grafted in. So when I say Israel, I mean you. If you love Yeshua, you're part of that. If you accept him as Messiah. So everyone focuses on that. We have to reflect a light. But what happens during a lunar eclipse? That's what I want to talk about today. So many years ago, I had this experience. And I'm going to try to go into some of it, but there's a lot to this story, and I want to be concise. So I was somewhere where I couldn't be in the light because people knew where I had been. But I couldn't be in the darkness because I refused to be cruel and treat people in a manipulative or abusive way. I couldn't be in the light because people knew what I knew or where I had come from. I was in this strange place in between. I remember walking around thinking, I'm a monster. All the things I know. And at one point, I remember, it was in this night, and I don't remember the order of events because this was 20 years ago, guys. It's a long time. But sitting there in my car at this point, because, well, it was late and I wasn't sure exactly what to do with myself. So I just felt the Lord was not there. Now, this is an interesting experience for me because I wasn't really a believer at that time. I mean, I believed in him. I had repented and come to accept Messiah, but I didn't read my Bible. I didn't know anything about anything. Or at least I didn't think I did. I knew a lot of things I did. I wouldn't want anyone to know. But I don't know. And I felt like he was gone. And it wasn't until this week, I think, until I realized why. Because I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, where? Like you don't realize what air feels like until you can't breathe. There's a lot more to the story. I want to go into it, but I just don't think we have time. Another time, maybe. And so it was like he wasn't there. And I was really upset because then I realized how much of a part of my life he always was. He was always there, like air, like oxygen that we breathe. And to feel that separation was horrible. And I thought, where did you go? And this small voice, even though I couldn't feel him, he was there. Small voice. The sun will rise. And I had hope in that this would pass. And I didn't understand this. And even it's been 20 years, I didn't understand this until reading this week. Because something else had happened that night. Like I said, I tried to be with the people in the light, but they wouldn't have me. They preach so much tolerance and love and all of this, but yet they are not loving. There were people who were loving in the darkness, the wolves that were in the darkness. Actually, some were quite loving. But I wouldn't join their lives. I was in the darkness. And there in the darkness, I came across a woman. And she was in trouble. And I got her somewhere safe. That's what the moon does. See, there's this idea of light and dark. Right? Jew and Gentile. Male and female. All these things. And actually, this is something else that I read today in Galatians that my aunt had told me to read. She said, you need to read Galatians again. I've read it before, but I read this part of it, like I'm just like, how can you continue to get more and more out of the very same thing? But in Galatians 3:28, it says, there's not Jew nor Greek, there's not slave nor free, there's not male and female, for you are all one in Messiah Yeshua. See, we're so busy deciding that we are righteous or unrighteous, and we make these lines. So let me go back to that darkness, because I think it's going to explain it. I'm really trying to explain this. So why? Why did Jesus say, why have you forsaken me? Do you think, like, I don't think he just didn't tell the truth. It's not like he was making that up. Right? Why did I feel that? I obviously wasn't. I wasn't alone. But I was in such a dark place. And to feel separated from him and still love people and do the right thing. I don't know how to explain how that felt. I don't understand it. But sometimes it's the space between that's the most important. Which means you have to be on one side. So let me explain. We have the earth here, or the sun, and then here's the earth. And here's the moon. And the moon is revolving around the earth, right? Giving light in the darkness, because that's where you're needed. You're not needed in the light. Those people that didn't want me, that judged me, they were already in the light. Well, in figuratively speaking, in the light, they were righteous. Maybe not, but comparatively in this situation. We can also see this with the law keepers in Torah, right? They're so righteous. And then you have these Gentiles over here, and oh, they're bad, right? Because they're this or they're that. They're not keeping all the law. Okay, maybe. I mean, that's true. The law is the law, right? But it's not the law that saves us. And this is what Paul was writing about. He was trying to explain this. And in this last week's Torah portion and gospel portion, it talks about Jesus destroying the temple and rebuilding it in 3 days. Why would you rebuild something and go back and rebuild what had been destroyed? Because that's what people are doing now when they build up these righteous, like, little camps, right? Because that's not what saves you guys. It's not. Is it good to keep the law? Absolutely. I'm not saying you shouldn't. So when the moon spins around the earth, here's the sun, right? And what happens when the moon faces the sun and blocks the light to the nations? Because sometimes we can do this, and this was one of the points that I tried to make, well, a while ago with somebody who was doing this teaching. But I didn't get to, unfortunately. Sometimes we can be so focused on God that we actually stop others from seeing Him. And this is what happens when the moon eclipses the sun. The nations can't see Him because you're so focused on God. You're not sharing that light with anybody else. It reminds me of this Johnny Cash song, "You're so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good." Listen to it. I love it, right? That this is why it's so important that we love our neighbors as ourselves. Because Yeshua said there's love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, right? Might or might. Anyway. And to love your neighbor as yourself. Because you can love God so much and turn your back on man. And then you're not acting as the moon. You're staying in the light. But what good are you in the light? And maybe that's just me. Because if I had stayed in the light, would I have been there for that woman? So this is where it gets a little more complicated. What happens when the moon, the light of the sun, is blocked by the earth and there's a lunar eclipse? What happens then? When the moon is in darkness? Like I was. I felt so forsaken. Just like our Lord and Savior. And I'm glad this happened because it's not like there hasn't been other dark times, but those words, the sun will rise. The sun will rise. It got me through it. So there's times when the world actually feels like it blocks out the light of the Lord. And sometimes we can feel like we're forsaken, that He doesn't love us. And I'm going to tell you, it's happened many times for me where I'm like, why are you letting me go through this? And I get upset. So I'm glad that he taught me this week. So there's an importance because we as believers have to be focused on God, facing God, and also facing the people. Because when we do that, then that light can go out to all the people, good or bad. The rain falls on the good and the bad too. Isn't that what Ecclesiastes says? Who are we to judge who gets it? We don't know the heart of men. And it doesn't matter because they're all chained. All of us were in chains. And this is what I'm going to go into next, I think. So, what's a chain without a lock, right? A chain without a lock is simply a pile of metal on the ground. It's not going to stay on you. It has to be locked onto you. And everyone's so worried about breaking chains. Yes, he is a chain breaker. Absolutely. But if you have no lock. So I'm going to tell you another story that's a little peculiar, but it applies. And this is from a few years back. I had a dream. And I know I have some interesting dreams, but this one stayed with me. I'm laying on my side. I don't know exactly where I'm at. I mean, it's been a couple of years, so I can't remember the details like that. But in the dream, I'm laying on my side, and there's this person laying next to me. We're on the ground. We're like outside or something. Anyway, on the other side of them is Yeshua. Or in the dream, that's who I was, what's the word? Who I acknowledged him to be. And this is so weird. I don't know how to explain this. It was very, anyway. And I reached through the person that I was facing. I was facing them as if they were like sleeping or sick or I don't know what they were doing, but they were like laying there on their side. And I reached through them, but Jesus reached through the other side. And we touched each other in the center. I don't know if touch is the right word. It was like there was a key where we met. And it unlocked something. I can't remember the rest of the dream, but it was powerful, right? And here's why. So I prayed about this. It was very, like, I was like, what was that all about? And in the spirit, I had prayed about other people. And I pray for people a lot. Probably not as much as I should. But, I was praying for people or praying about people. And I don't remember how this happened, again, years ago. But I did the same thing, only in the spirit, where I'm lifting them up in prayer. Where I put them between me and Yeshua. Now, I'm not saying elevating them. Okay, that's not what I mean, as in like making them into an idol, putting them between me and God in the sense of worship, but more of lifting them up. I lowered myself to be able to do that, right? To be over here in between the sun and the moon and the nations. Now, I didn't make this association until this week, all right? So this is all kind of new for me. So I'm kind of stumbling through it. And if you think I get something wrong, please tell me. But when I would do that, and praying for someone, it was as if, and this was really cool, it was as if there was a lock. And when this would happen in prayer in the Spirit, all of this stuff would just come out of them. It was like opening something up, and all of this shame and guilt and sin and all of these things that they were a part of, whether it was, I don't need to judge. I actually witnessed these things, but I witnessed this happen. And some of the things that I saw, I couldn't have known, but were true. And it wasn't something like I wanted to know, oh, this person did this or was part of that. It wasn't about that. And I have been accused of looking at people and just wanting information about them. Like I want to control them or something. And I can understand why somebody would think that. It's very scary to have your secrets exposed. It's humbling to know someone, to be known, right? And I'm not sure I understood why this happened until this week. And I was like, I don't understand what the function of this is. A lot of times we are locked and locked into our shame, our guilt. It's all forgiven, guys. He died for you so that you didn't have to be a scapegoat, so that you didn't have to pay the price. So all of these other things, the law, he destroyed that temple using the law. He used the law, and when we do something on scapegoats, I want to go into that because it's pretty amazing stuff. But he used the law to set us free from the law. It's amazing. So you don't have to be ashamed, but yet we are, and we're locked. That lock is stuck, right? And you can break all the chains that you want. There will always be another chain. The devil will find another chain to put on you. But when that lock is unlocked and all of those things come out of you because you are made clean, you are a new creation, all of that is gone. What are they going to attach to you if there's nothing to attach it to? And this is the freedom that we find in Yeshua. No, they have to take it. They have to want it. They have to accept it. They have to accept it. We have to accept what he's giving us. Sometimes we as Israel have to get on the other side of the person so that they can even see that it's there, that it can be accepted, that a long time ago somebody told me that all I need is Jesus. And they were absolutely right. But then why are we called to be the light? My response is, and this is harsh, but if all I need is Jesus, then why do I need you? He didn't say, hey, just tell everyone about Jesus. He said, go carry your cross. Follow me. Be like me. This is what he's calling us to do. That's in the entirety of it. He was forsaken. He felt forsaken. Why? I'm going to explain this. It goes back to that dream. So when the sun is here and the moon is here and the earth is smack dab in the middle, the light of the sun doesn't get to the moon. Well, a little bit does, which makes it that red tint, I guess. I'm not really entirely sure the science behind it, but you get the idea. But it's in that darkest hour that the power is there, right? Jesus went into the darkness, not just the darkness, death. He became death and sin. Forsaken. Why? So why is that important? And I pulled up the Bible verse that I want to reference. Because in James 4:8 it says, "Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded." Now, I wanted to reference more of Jeremiah. Then you will call, Jeremiah 29:12-14. Then you will call upon me and go and pray to me, and I will listen to you, and you will seek me and find me when you search for me with your heart, with all your heart. I will be found by you, says the Lord. And I will bring you back from your captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and from all the places where I have driven you, says the Lord, and I will bring you to a place from which I caused you to be carried away. So this is just two that came up in my quick little search. I'm sure I could find other references, but basically, if you draw close to God, he will draw close to you. That's what he wants us to do. So if you put somebody smack dab in the middle and you draw near to him and he draws near to you, that person's in the middle and you love them. You love them. You're touching their heart, guys. That's power. But what does that take? That takes a lot of darkness. Right? I was sitting there in the darkness thinking, God left me. The sun would rise. The moon would come out from behind the earth and it would pass. Because that's the natural order of things. It's the law. So what did Jesus really do? Did he abolish the law? No, he used the law to set us free. So Jesus did this for us. Obviously, we don't need to do what he did. He already did that. But how many times have you seen somebody in a really dark place and you're too afraid to go into the darkness, or you justify it? Here's a big justification. That if you go around people like that you might be influenced too. I've seen that quite a bit. And I even fell for it. I thought, they know better than me, right? But recently I realized something, that when you have that peace that surpasses all understanding, your person doesn't change based on the company you keep. Now, I am not saying that you should go be around people that cause you to sin. You need to be smart. And I know that there's a few people that I can't go be around because they know me too well. They know how to push my buttons. It's a problem and don't respect boundaries and whatnot. So I'm not saying you should be foolish. But for the most part, I didn't have the problem. It didn't matter who I was around, at least when it came to unrighteous folk, right? People who are not keeping the law the way other people are. But when I would go around the people keeping the law, I did change my behavior because I felt their judgment and their condemnation. And this is what Jesus was freeing us from that. He was freeing us from the law. And it took him doing all of those things and enduring all of that so that we could be free. Does this mean that the law is not the law? People need to understand. The law isn't what we as Westerners think of the law. We don't get to vote on these laws. These are not legal laws as in, oh, well, you can't speed. You can't do this. This is, the law is a spiritual law, just like a scientific law. We know gravity works, right? We don't need to test it anymore. It's not a theory. There are a lot of theories that are masquerading as science right now, but there are still laws of science that we know. We don't need to test them anymore, right? The Torah is the law. It is written down as physical aspects of a spiritual law. So when you take the entirety of the Torah, you see this picture of the law. So I spend a lot of time on what the law is. And what these people in the light, and I'm doing this in quotations because I'm referencing this experience that I had, and actually multiple experiences. They are using the law to condemn, right? And then the people in the darkness are rebelling against the law, so they're rejecting it completely. They're both burdened by the same laws. Both of them, both the lamb and the lion, right? Both the sheep and the wolf, all of them governed by the same law. Because it's a spiritual law, guys. It is fact. Do this, this is what's going to happen. But Jesus used the law to free us from the law. And I'm going to use gravity again. Okay? We know gravity is real. And up until not that long ago, we couldn't overcome it. And now we can fly using those same laws. The laws that govern how we build an airplane, that overcome this law. It's the law. Are you going to argue with that? But he had to do that. And oh, it's so beautiful. I want to talk about this so much more, but I'm not going to today. So when he did this, he freed us from that. Okay? So that lock that was keeping us bound to the chains of the law, of all these Torah, not Torah, mitzvahs. It's gone. It's gone. Now, does that mean you go out and sin? No. Because if you really have him in your heart and he did this, then you're going to understand, love each other and love God. You're going to do them already. I didn't know what the law was, and yet I followed it because he was with me in the darkness. He was in my heart. The law was in my heart. And so it's not that you're going to be free to just live in the flesh and do whatever you want, because it's going to be in your heart. You're already going to know what to do. You're going to make mistakes. We all do. But it's not by the law that we are saved. And this is what Paul writes about in Galatians. Why are we trying to rebuild something he destroyed? And he wanted to build something new. And on this rock, he will build his church. And he was talking about Peter, right? Was it Peter? No, it was what Peter did. He recognized him as Messiah. I loved him. So we accept that. Jesus did that for us. But we can do little pits for other people by putting them between us and God, not in an elevation, but by humbling ourselves and lifting them up to the Lord. Not being afraid to be in the darkness with them. Because then when we draw close to God, with God drawing close to us, and we've lifted this person up, this is when the chains fall off. This is when people are delivered from demons. This is when people are healed. This is when power happens in this world. We can do this. He tells us we can. Anyone who says that you can't do it is lying to you, and they are deceiving you, and they are rejecting the gospel. He gave us power through him. Because I could reach into someone's heart and be manipulative, get what I want, what I desire, whatever that is, right? But when he's on the other side, when I'm not really reaching into them, but reaching towards him, that key, whatever that was that I touched when I touched him and their heart at the same time, whatever that is, and I don't understand it, guys. I don't. I don't. Ask me in 5 more years, and I'll probably have more to say because he's teaching me every day. But you can do that. You can do that because you don't have to be afraid of the darkness ever again. Because you are going to go into the darkness. You're going to eat with prostitutes and tax collectors. You're going to show them God. And you're going to bring God. You're bringing God to them by humbling yourself and getting beneath them or on the other side of them. Whatever you want to call it. Right? You're bringing God to them by doing that. I'm not saying humble like, oh, I'm so this and I'm just and putting yourself down. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying, how do I explain that? I hope I explained that good. So I guess the gist of this is when it seems like it's the darkest and the Lord has forsaken you, and you know that you're not just in the flesh because you're in your whatever situation, but this is different, that you're in the darkness. Remember that Jesus felt forsaken too, right before he saved the entire world. Don't be afraid of the darkness. He overcame the darkness. And don't be afraid of the light, because he freed us from the curse of the law. Just be the moon. Just be the moon. And know the sun will rise. Because it always does.